You guys are not going to believe what happened to me last week here in New York. I've been a rideshare driver for 3 years, and I've seen some crazy stuff in this job. But this one was a real shocker. Imagine this. You pick up a ride from a motel, normal enough, right? But when I look in the rearview mirror, I recognize the woman. It's Jessica, my neighbor Mike's wife, and the guy next to her, her brother, Jake. My blood ran cold right then and there. But what I found out later, man, that changed everything I thought I knew about this family. Get ready, because this story has more twists than a back road in the Appalachian Mountains. My name is Frank, I'm 34, and I've been driving the streets of New York as a rideshare driver since 2021. I'm always saying this job is a real-life education. You see a little bit of everything inside this silver Camry that's my work vehicle. It was a Thursday afternoon, around 2 o'clock, one of those brutally hot days that only someone who's spent a summer in the city can truly appreciate. I was in the West Village area when a ride popped up. Pickup from the Serene Stay Motel, destination Chelsea. Nothing unusual, a common ride. Motels are always busy, especially in the afternoon, right? Married folks taking advantage of their lunch break for some work meeting. I got to the Serene Stay and pulled up out front. It's a discreet motel, one of those that doesn't draw much attention, with an older but well-maintained facade. I messaged the passenger to let them know I'd arrived and waited. 2 minutes later, I see a couple coming out a side door. He's got a baseball cap and sunglasses on, and she's walking with her head down, kind of hiding behind a big purse. They approached the car, and when the woman lifted her head to confirm if it was the right vehicle, man, my heart almost stopped. It was Jessica. Jessica Miller, my neighbor Mike's wife, for about 5 years now. I live in a simple townhouse condo in Queens, one of those with a row of attached houses. Mike's a great guy, works at a car dealership, always says hi, and sometimes we grab a beer on the weekend. Jessica, 28, a pretty brunette, was always polite to me, but a bit reserved. They have a little girl, Sophie, about 4 years old, a total doll. And there she was, coming out of a motel with another man. When I recognized who she was with, the situation got even worse. It was Jake, Mike's brother-in-law, Jessica's brother. A guy about 30, always seemed like a smooth operator who I'd seen a few times at the condo's community barbecues. The kind of guy you look at and just get a bad vibe from. They got in the car in absolute silence. Jessica in the back, Jake in the front. The atmosphere was heavier than a New York City blizzard. Afternoon, I said, trying to sound natural, but my voice came out a little strained. Afternoon, Jake replied dryly, without even looking at me. Jessica didn't say anything, just kept fiddling with her phone. Her hands trembled. I started the car and we drove off. The traffic was light on 10th Ave, but the silence inside the car was deafening. A million thoughts were racing through my mind. Did they recognize? What do I do with this information? Do I tell Mike? Do I pretend I didn't see anything? That's when I heard Jessica whisper to Jay, "You promised this was the last time." "I didn't promise anything," he replied softly, but I still heard it. "You know perfectly well this is never going to end." Oh my God. This wasn't just a simple affair. Something much more serious was going on. I stopped at the first red light on 40, and in the rearview mirror, I saw Jessica. It wasn't the cry of someone guilty of cheating on. It was the cry of desperation, fear. I recognized because I'd seen that kind of tear before. "Stop with the drama," Jake said. "You created this situation. Now deal with the consequences." "I was just a kid," she replied, between sobs. "A kid who killed someone," he shot back coldly. Guys, I almost crashed the car when I heard that. Killed someone? What kind of story was this? The light turned green and I had to keep driving, but I was in complete shock. The Jessica I knew, a dedicated mother, a seemingly happy wife, had killed someone, and her brother was using it against her? The rest of the trip was a nightmare. They continued whispering things I couldn't fully understand, but I caught loose words. Money. Mike can't know. Cops? End everything. When we got to their destination, an upscale residential building in Chelsea, Jessica got out first, still with her head down. Jake stayed in the car for a moment. "Listen here," he said, turning to me for the first time. "You didn't see anything today, understood?" I was speechless for a few seconds. He continued, I know where you live, Frank. I know you're Mike's neighbor. It would be a shame if something happened to your family because of some unnecessary gossip. How did he know my name? I hadn't introduced my... That's when it hit me. Of course he recognized me too. Relax, man, trying to sound calm. I didn't see a thing. He gave me a $50 bill as a tip, way more than the normal thing. Got out of the car with a smile that didn't reach it. I sat there for about 5 minutes, trying to process everything that my head was spinning. What was I supposed to do with this information? My first reaction was to call my brother Mark, who lives in Boston, and has always been my confidant for life's pickles. But when I picked up my phone, I hesitated. This story was too big, too complicated to solve over the phone. I decided to go home and think it through. On the way, passing the entrance to my condo, I saw Mike washing his car in the driveway with little Sophie playing with a doll beside him. A scene so normal, so happy, and there I was, carrying a secret that could destroy that family. I parked my car in my spot and Mike waved at me, smiling as always. "Hey Frank, how was your day?" "Quiet, Mike. How about you?" "Just doing some chores on the weekend, you know." Jessica went out with her brother to run some errands downtown. You know how it is, women always have a million things to take care of. My blood ran cold again, so he really had no idea. "Yeah, I guess," I replied, forcing a smile. "I'm heading inside, man. See you later." I walked into my house with wobbly legs. My wife, Julie, was in the kitchen preparing dinner. She noticed right away that I looked strange. "What's that look for, babe? Something happened?" How could I explain that I had just discovered our neighbor was being blackmailed by her own brother-in-law over a murder? How could I tell her I had witnessed something that could destroy the lives of people we saw every day? "Nothing, Jules, just a busy day," I lied. But I knew I couldn't keep it to myself for long. The question was, what the hell was I going to do with this information? Because one thing I was sure of, this wasn't the first time they had met at that motel, and from the sound of the conversation, it wouldn't be the last. And you know how it is, right? When you discover a secret like this, it feels like the universe conspires to get you more and more involved in the story. And that's exactly what happened to me in the following days. If you think this story is already crazy, just wait until you hear what happened next. Because what I found out next completely changed my view of that family and almost cost me dearly. A week passed since that damn day, and I couldn't get the story out of my head. Every time I saw Mike playing with Sophie in the yard, or when I crossed paths with Jessica at the condo gate, my stomach would churn. Jessica, by the way, changed completely with me after that day. Before, she'd at least give a polite hi, but now she'd pretend she didn't see me. It was obvious she knew I had recognized her and Jake. I tried to go on with my normal life, do my ride, pretend nothing had happened. But have you ever tried to forget a bombshell? Impossible, man. It was like trying not to think of a pink elephant. The more you try to forget, the more the thing keeps pounding in your head. It was a Tuesday night that I made the most reckless decision. I was going to investigate this story myself. Julie had gone to bed early. She works at the hospital and is always exhausted. So I took the opportunity to do some searching on Google. I looked for murder cases in New York over the last few years, fatal accidents, anything that could give me a clue about what Jessica might have done. I didn't find anything specific, of course, but one thing caught my attention. I remembered that when I moved to the condo 5 years ago, Jessica and Mike were newlyweds. She seemed a little shaken back then, very thin, always a little scared. I thought it was shyness, but now it made more sense. On Thursday, I decided to drive by the Serene Stay during my lunch break. I don't really know what I expected to find, but I had to do something. I got there around 12:30 and watched the traffic. After about 20 minutes, I recognized Jake's car, a black Honda Civic, pulling into the motel. He was alone. I waited. 15 minutes later, a taxi pulled up out front, and Jessica got out. She looked around several times before going in, as if she was afraid of being seen. Man, that confirmed my suspicion. They were meeting regularly. But from Jessica's body language, it wasn't a romantic rendezvous at all. It was something she was being forced to do. I waited another hour there, disguised, until they came out. This time, they left separately. She in a taxi, he in his car. Jessica had an even worse expression than the first time. It looked like she had been crying a lot. That's when I made the mistake of my life. I decided to follow Jake. He drove straight to a travel agency in Gramercy, one of those that does currency exchange and international transfers. He stayed there for about 40 minutes. When he came out, he had a briefcase in his hand and a look of satisfaction on his face. Damn, the guy was laundering money or sending it out of the country, or both. On Friday, I decided to approach a source that could help me. Mr. Anderson, the doorman at our condo. He's one of those old-school doormen who knows everyone's business and always has some gossip to tell. Mr. Anderson, I started slowly. You know Mike's family well, right? I do, Frank. Why do you ask? Oh, just curious. They always seemed like a very close couple to me. But lately, Jessica seems a little strange, don't you think? Mr. Anderson looked around, made sure no one was nearby, and leaned in closer to me. Look, don't go spreading this around, but that girl has always been trouble. When they moved here, she had just gotten out of a psychiatric hospital. My heart sped up. Psychiatric hospital? Yeah. Mike mentioned once that she had a crisis when she was younger. I never knew exactly what it was, but it was apparently serious. She was institutionalized for almost a year. And her brother Jake? Oh, that one's another lost cause. Always getting into shady business, you know. I've seen him arguing with her several times right here at the gate. One time she was crying so much that Mike had to come down to see what was happening. And what did Jake say? He said it was a family matter, that they were resolving some old issues. But from the look on Jessica's face, it wasn't anything good. This information changed everything. Psychiatric hospital. A crisis when she was younger. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit together. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about all the possibilities. What if Jessica really did kill someone when she was a teenager? And if she was a minor at the time, did she manage to cover up the case? And what if Jake found out and was using that to blackmail her? On Saturday morning, I made an even more reckless decision. I was going to try and talk to Jessica herself. I waited for her to leave to take Sophie to school. Mike always worked on Saturdays and mustered up the courage. When she came back, I was casually washing my car in the driveway. Jessica, I called out as she walked by. She stopped, but didn't turn around. Hi, Frank. Can I talk to you for a minute? She turned around now. And man, the look of terror on her face made me feel sorry for her. Her eyes were red with deep, dark circles. She had lost a lot of weight in 1 week. There's nothing to talk about, she replied, trying to sound firm, but her voice was shaky. Jessica, I know you're going through a difficult situation. If you need help, you don't know anything. She cut me off, but then lowered her voice. And it's better for you to keep it that way. Is your brother threatening you? She was in shock that I had said it so directly. She looked around nervously and moved closer to me. Frank, for God's sake, forget what you saw. For your family's sake, just forget it. Jessica, if someone is blackmailing you... It's not blackmail, she interrupted me. It's justice. I did a terrible thing a long time ago and now I'm paying for it. That's how it's supposed to be. What terrible thing? You were a kid. She looked at me with an expression I'll never forget. A mix of desperation, guilt, and a deep weariness. I killed my best friend, Frank. It was an accident, but I killed her. And if Mike finds out, if the police find out, I'll lose everything. My daughter, my life, everything. And before I could answer, she ran into her house. Man, I stood there for about 10 minutes, trying to process what I had just heard. She had confessed. She really had killed someone. But the more I thought about it, one thing bothered me. If it was an accident when she was a minor, why was Jake still able to blackmail her? Why couldn't she just tell her husband the truth? Something about this story didn't add up, and I was determined to find out what it was, because one thing I had learned in my years as a driver, every story has two sides, and sometimes the truth is very different from what it seems at first glance. The problem was that the more I poked at this hornet's nest, the more dangerous it became, and I still had no idea how far this story was going to take me. After Jessica's confession, I spent the entire weekend with that thought pounding in my head. On Monday, I could barely work properly. I was taking rides on autopilot, my mind completely focused on finding out more about this story. That's when I remembered someone who could help me. Mrs. Thompson, my neighbor on the left. She's retired. One of those people who keeps up with everyone's lives, but always with good intentions. And most importantly, she's from Washington, D.C., the same city Jessica came from before she moved to New York. On Tuesday afternoon, I mustered up the courage and knocked on her door. "Hi, Mrs. Thompson, how are you?" "Hi, honey. What a miracle you're stopping by. Come on in." "Come on in." Her house is a walking museum, full of old photos and memories. I accepted a cup of coffee and started the conversation slowly. "Mrs. Thompson, you know Jessica's story well, right? She's from D.C. too, just like you." "Oh yes, poor girl. She had such a hard life, honey." My heart sped up. "Hard in what way? You don't know?" "She lost her best friend in a tragedy when she was 16. It was a very sad thing, very traumatic for her." "What kind of tragedy?" Mrs. Thompson looked around, as if she were about to tell a state secret. They were at a birthday party up in Georgetown. A teenager's party, you know. Lots of drinking, parents far away. Her friend, poor thing, was named Melissa. They had been inseparable since they were little. And what happened? Melissa drank too much, way too much. And Jessica, who was also a little tipsy, agreed to drive her home. Imagine, two 16-year-old girls drunk driving in the middle of the night. I felt a chill run down my spine. And then they crashed the car, honey. It was a terrible accident on the I-495. Melissa didn't survive her injuries. Jessica was in the hospital for a few months. Then she had severe depression and was institutionalized in a psychiatric hospital for almost a year. And what about Melissa's family? Ah, that's where things got ugly. Melissa's parents were important people in D.C. Her dad was a judge. They blamed Jessica for the accident, said she convinced their daughter to drink, that she forced the situation. They filed a criminal lawsuit against her. Now I was starting to understand the situation better. And what happened with the lawsuit? Look, I still lived there at the time, and I followed the whole thing. Jessica's family, who also has some money, her dad's a businessman, got good lawyers. Since she was a minor and was also intoxicated, they managed to get a settlement. The case was dismissed, but she had to do community service, psychological treatment, things like that. And why did she move to New York? Escape her past, honey. DC is a big city, but social circles are small. Everyone knew the story. She couldn't rebuild her life there. When she met Mike on a business trip, she saw an opportunity for a fresh start. This information completely changed perspective on the situation. If everything was legally resolved more than 10 years ago, why was Jake still able to blackmail Jessica? "Mrs. Thompson," I asked, "what about her brother Jake? Do you know him well?" Mrs. Thompson's expression changed completely. "Oh, honey, that one's a lost cause. He was always a troublemaker, always getting into trouble. When Jessica had the accident, he thought he could take advantage of the situation." "How so?" "He started blackmailing his own sister for years. He said he would tell everyone about the accident, that he would ruin the family's reputation. He extorted money from her, from their parents. That's why Jessica's parents kind of disowned him. They got tired of funding his crazy schemes, said. Jake wasn't blackmailing Jessica over a hidden crime. He was using her trauma, the guilt she felt, to manipulate and extort money. And he came to New York too. He came after her out 2 years. When he found out she was married well, that Mike had money, he saw an opportunity to keep bleeding her dry. "But Mrs. Thompson," I asked, "if everything was resolved legally, why wouldn't Jessica just tell her husband the truth?" "Oh, honey, you don't understand. That girl carries a terrible guilt. She feels responsible for her best friend's death, and Jake always rubbed it in her face, always made her believe that if other people knew, she would be judged as a murderer. And there's one more thing," she continued, lowering her voice. "Jake always threatened to tell a different version of the story, to say she planned everything, that she forced Melissa to drink, that it wasn't an accident. And since she doesn't remember everything that happened that night because of the alcohol, she was always afraid it could be true." Man, I left Mrs. Thompson's house with my head on fire. The situation was much more complex than I imagined. Jessica wasn't a murderer being blackmailed for a crime. She was a victim being manipulated by her own brother, using the trauma of an accident that happened when she was a teenager. That night, I told Julie everything. She was shocked by the story, but she gave me a piece of advice that changed my perspective. "Frank, You have to help that girl. Imagine the psychological torture she's living through every day. And on top of that, being exploited by her own brother. But how, Jules? If I get involved, I could make everything worse. You can talk to her, show her she's not alone. Sometimes an outsider with an objective perspective can make the victim see the situation differently. On Wednesday, I decided to follow my wife's advice. I waited for Jessica to get back from taking Sophie to school and approached her again. Jessica, can we talk for 5 minutes? She hesitated, but ended up agreeing. We went to the condo's playground, where it was more private. Look, I talked to Mrs. Thompson about your story in DC. She went pale. Frank, for God's...
Jessica, listen to me. What happened to you and your friend was an accident. You were kids. You were drinking. It was a tragedy. But it wasn't your fault. Yes, it was. If I hadn't insisted on us leaving the... Jessica, to get her. Your brother is manipulating. He's using your guilt, your trauma, to exploit you financially. Started. You don't understand? He knows things. He said he has proof that I forced Melissa to drink, that I...
Planned everything. What proof? Proof of what? You were 16, you were traumatized, institutionalized. What proof could he possibly have? He said he has photos from the party, messages I sent to Melissa the day before, conversations where I said bad things about her parents. Jessica, that doesn't prove you plan to kill your friend. Those are normal teenage things. For the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. You really think so? I'm sure of it. And you know what I think. I think your brother has no proof of anything. He just uses your guilt and fear against you. We were silent for a few minutes. She wiped her tears and looked at me with a different expression. Even if you're right, Frank, how do I stop this? He's already taken so much of my money, Mike's money. If I tell the truth now, my marriage will end anyway. Or maybe it won't. Mike loves you, Jessica. He can understand. And what if he doesn't? What if he thinks I'm a murderer? I'll lose my daughter, my life. It was at that point that I realized how Jake had managed to keep the blackmail going for so long. He didn't need real proof. He just needed to keep Jessica scared, insecure, believing she was guilty of something terrible. But I had planted a seed of doubt in her head, and sometimes that's all a manipulated person needs. An outsider saying, "This isn't right, you don't deserve to go through this." Now it remained to be seen if that seed would grow enough for her to have the courage to confront her brother. Because one thing I had realized, if Jessica didn't stop Jake herself, he would continue to bleed her dry until he completely destroyed her life and her marriage. And I couldn't let that happen. After that conversation with Jessica, I realized she was starting to question the version of events that her brother had always pushed on her, but she was still far from having the courage to face the situation. On Thursday, I made a decision. I was going to gather evidence that proved Jake was lying about the supposed proof he claimed to have. I started by searching online about the accident. I looked through the archives of the Washington Post, on the local news sites, on every news website I could find. It was an accident involving a judge's daughter. I was sure it had been in the media at the time, and I found it. A small article published in March 2013. Teenage girl dies in I-495 accident. The article was very factual, without many details, but it confirmed everything Mrs. Thompson had told me. Melissa Sullivan, 16, daughter of Judge Alan Sullivan, died in a car accident. The car was driven by a friend, also 16, who was injured but survived. Nothing in the article suggested it had been intentional. On the contrary, it was clearly treated as an accident involving intoxicated teenagers. I looked for more news about the development of the case, but I didn't find anything, which was normal. Cases involving minors have a sealed court record. On Friday, I decided to make a bolder move. I called a colleague of mine, a guy named Rick, who works as a private investigator here in New York. We met on a ride about 2 years ago and kept in touch. "Rick, I need your help," I said, getting straight to the point. "What's up, Frank? What kind of trouble have you gotten yourself into now?" I explained the whole situation to him, obviously omitting specific names. Rick listened carefully and then let out a low whistle. "Man, this is more common than you think. A family member exploiting a relative's trauma to extort money. I've had several cases like this. Do you think you can find out if this proof the guy says he has really exists? Look, if it was a case that was dismissed more than 10 years ago involving a minor, it's very unlikely that there's secret proof that only he has. Usually everything that exists is in the court record, which is sealed. And how can we find out? Leave it to me. I have some contacts in DC who can take a discreet look at the case. Send me the names and the approximate date. On Saturday, while I was doing rides, my phone rang. It was Jessica. Frank, can you come pick me up? It's urgent. Where are you? At the bus terminal. Please, it's an emergency. Man, I cancelled the ride right away and drove like a maniac to the bus terminal. I found her there with a small suitcase in her hand, crying hysterically. Jessica, what happened? He found out we talked, she said, between sobs. Someone must have seen us and told him. He came to the house this morning when Mike was at work and said if I don't get him $20,000 by Monday, he's going to tell my husband everything. $20,000? Jessica, where are you going to get that kind of money? I don't know. I already sold my jewelry. I already took out a loan in Mike's name without him knowing. I have nowhere else to get it from. She was desperate, completely at a loss. That's when I made the bravest decision of my life. Jessica, that's enough. This has to stop today. It can't. You don't understand? Yes, I do. And I'm going to help you prove your brother is lying. I took her home and explained my plan. Rick had managed to get some preliminary information through his contact. There was no additional evidence in the case beyond what had already been presented at the time. And most importantly, all the proof that existed clearly showed it had been an accident. Jessica, your brother,
has been bluffing for years. He uses your guilt and your trauma against, but he has no evidence that you planned anything. How can you be so sure? Because if he did, he would have used it a long time ago. A blackmailer doesn't hold back a trump. He uses everything he has to pressure the victim. I showed her the article I found online, explained what Rick had discovered. For the first time in years, I saw a spark of hope in what if I tell Mike and he doesn't believe me? Jessica, let's do something different. Let's record a conversation with your brother. Let's make him admit he's lying. That's dangerous. It's less dangerous than continuing to be his hostage for the rest of your life. We spent the rest of Saturday. The idea was for her to arrange a meeting with Jake on Sunday in a public but secluded place. I would stay near, recording everything on my phone. The goal was to get him to admit that the proof didn't exist, that he was
just exploiting her guilt. On Sunday morning, Jessica called her brother. Jake, about the money you asked for. I got it, but I want to talk to you before I hand it over. You got the 20 grand. I got it, but this time I want you to show me the proof you're always talking about. I want to see it with my own eyes. There was a silence on the other end of the line. What proof? The photos, the messages, everything you say proves I planned Melissa's death. Jessica, what's with you? You know perfectly well that, Jake, after so many years of paying for this, I have a right to see the proof, don't I? Another silence. This one was longer. Meet me at 2 p.m. in Central Park and bring the money. I'll bring it, but you bring the proof. We hung up, and I knew the strategy had worked. Jake was clearly uncomfortable when she asked to see the evidence. The time for the meeting arrived. I positioned myself at a safe distance, but where I could record everything on my phone. Jessica arrived promptly at 2 o'clock. Jake showed up 10 minutes later, clearly nervous. Where's the money? Was the first thing he asked. Where's the proof? She shot back. What's with this obsession with proof? You know perfectly well what happened that night. I know what happened, Jake. It was an accident. 2 drunk teenagers. They crashed the car. 1 died. But you've always said you had evidence that I planned everything. I want to see it. Jake started to stutter. Jessica, this is
nonsense. You know that. I don't know anything. I want to see the messages you say I sent to Melissa. I want to see the photos from the party. I want to see everything. I don't have those things with me right now. Then I don't have the money with me right now. Man, it was beautiful. For the first time in years, she was confronting her turn. Jessica, don't do this to me. We've always had a good understanding. Jake, you've been blackmailed me for over 10 years. You've taken money from me, from my husband. You've made me live in constant fear. I never blackmailed you. I just helped you keep the secret to protect your marriage. Protect me. You almost destroyed my marriage. You almost destroyed my life. That's when he completely lost. Fine, Jessica. You want to know the truth? I never had any proof of anything. There were never any incriminating messages. There were never any photos. I just used your
guilt against you because I knew you were weak enough to believe it. That was it. It was recorded. The full confession. Jessica was in shock for a few seconds, processing what she had just heard. Then a mix of relief and anger took over her face. You tortured me for 10 years? For nothing? It wasn't for nothing. You've always had a good life, a rich husband. It was only fair that you shared it with me. Fair, fair, she screamed. You destroyed my self-esteem, my marriage, my
relationship with my daughter. You made me believe I was a murderer. You killed your best friend. It was an accident. I was a kid. Jake realized he had completely lost control of the situation. He tried one last shot. Even if you don't pay me anymore, Jessica, I can still tell Mike everything. I can still destroy your marriage. Go ahead and tell him with a firmness. I'll tell him myself. I'll tell him about the accident, about your blackmail, about
everything. He won't accept it. If he doesn't accept it, at least I'll have my dignity back. At least I won't be a hostage to a cowardly brother who exploits someone's trauma so he doesn't have to work. Jake stomped off, knowing he had lost his golden goose. Jessica stood there for a few minutes, as if she were waking up from a nightmare that had lasted more than 10 years. When she saw me approaching, she started to cry. But this time it wasn't a cry of desperation. It was a cry of relief. Frank, I can't believe I did it. I can't believe this is over. You did it, Jessica, and you were very brave. And now, how do I tell Mike everything? With the truth, all of it. He deserves to know, and you deserve to have a marriage based on honesty. Guys, you don't know how I was feeling at that moment. Helping someone free themselves from a situation of psychological manipulation is one of the most gratifying feelings there is. But if you think the story ends here, with a happy ending and everything resolved, you're very wrong. Because what happened on Monday when Mike found out about everything, man, that completely changed the course of events. Monday arrived and I was anxious to know how Jessica's conversation with Mike had gone. All morning I kept an eye on their place, but I didn't see either of them. Around 2 p.m, my phone rang. It was Jessica, and from her voice I knew immediately that something was very wrong. Frank, it all went wrong. Everything went
wrong. Calm down. I told Mike everything last night about the accident, about Jake's blackmail, about the meetings at the motel. He was in shock, and then he left the house without saying anything. He stayed out all night. This morning he came back just to get some clothes and said he needs some time to think. Even though I knew it was the right thing to, it's always hard to see the situation get worse before it gets. Jessica.
Where are you now? At home. Sophie's at school. I don't know what to do, Frank. What if he asks for a divorce? What if he wants to take my daughter away from me? Take a deep breath. Mike just needs time to process everything. Imagine the shock of finding out his wife has been blackmailed for years, but I should have told him sooner. He must feel betrayed, deceived. You were being manipulated, Jessica. You were a victim in this whole story. We talked for a few more minutes, me trying to calm her down when I heard my doorbell ring. It was Mike. Jessica, Mike's at my house. Let me talk to him. I opened the door, and man, I had never seen Mike like that. His eyes were red. He had stubble. His clothes were wrinkled. The man was destroyed. Mike, come on in. Want some coffee? I don't want anything, Frank. I just want to understand one thing. He sat down on the living room sofa, ran his hands over his face, and stared at me. You knew everything, didn't you? There was no point in lying. Yes, I did. And you didn't say anything to me. Mike, it wasn't my story to tell, and most importantly, I was trying to help Jessica free herself from the situation. Help her? He gave a bitter laugh. Frank, my wife has been deceiving me for 5 years of marriage, meeting another man at a motel, spending my money without me knowing. How is that helping? Mike, sit down here and listen to me carefully. I spoke with firmness because I saw he was only focused on the
cheating part, not the psychological manipulation. Your wife wasn't cheating on you. She's been blackmailed by her own brother since before you guys got married. Even if it was blackmail, she could have told me. We could have solved this together. But she had. Mike, your wife was living in fear of being judged for the worst moment of her life. She was 16 when that accident happened. 16, man. but she killed her best friend. It was an accident. Two drunk teenagers driving in the middle of the night. It could have happened to anyone. Mike was silent for a few minutes. I continued, Mike, you want to know why she never told you? Because she was afraid you'd react exactly how you're reacting now. With judgment, with anger, without trying to understand her side. Of course I'm angry. I just found out my wife has a parallel life I didn't know about. Parallel life? She was being psychologically tortured. Jake wasn't collecting money for fun. He was extorting it using her trauma. I took out my phone and showed him the recording from Sunday in the park. Listen to this. Listen to your brother-in-law admitting he never had any proof of anything, that he was just exploiting your wife's guilt to take money from you. Mike listened to the whole recording. I saw his expression gradually change from anger to surprise, from surprise to indignation. That son of a bitch, he muttered when the recording. He's been bleeding our family dry for years.
Exactly. And Jessica went through all of this alone, Mike. Alone, because she was afraid of losing you, of losing her daughter, of being judged for something that happened when she was practically a child. But why didn't she trust me? Because trauma isn't logical. A traumatized person doesn't make rational decisions. They make decisions based on fear, on guilt, on shame. Mike was quiet for a long time, processing everything. Frank, I feel like an idiot. Why? Because I always knew something was wrong. Jessica was always a little strange. She always had episodes of anxiety, of depression. She always changed the subject when I asked about her family. And in the last few months, she was clearly suffering from something. And why didn't you ask directly? I asked several times, but she always said everything was fine, that she was just tired from work, stressed with Sophie. I respected her space. Mike, you both made mistakes. She was wrong not to trust you. You were wrong not to insist more. But the main culprit in this story is Jake, who manipulated the whole situation for his own benefit. And now, how do we fix this? By talking, for real, without judgment, without anger. You need to rebuild the trust between you. But how can I trust her again? How can I be sure there aren't other secrets? Mike, you want a guarantee that your wife will never hide anything from you again? That guarantee doesn't exist. But what you can do is create an environment where she feels safe being honest with you. What do you mean? By showing her you won't judge her for the past. By showing her you're a team, that you face problems together. Jessica spent years thinking that if you knew the truth, you would abandon her, prove her wrong. Mike sighed deeply. Man, my head is exploding. I need to process all of this. You do. But Mike, while you're processing, your wife is at home destroying herself with guilt, thinking she's lost everything. And my daughter, how do I explain to Sophie that her uncle is a son of a bitch who got kicked out of the family? One thing at a time, Mike. First, deal with Jessica. The rest you'll decide together. He stayed at my house for a few more minutes, and we talked about several aspects of the situation. When he left, I could see he was still confused, but at least he wasn't angry at Jessica anymore. That night, around 9 o'clock, I heard a loud argument coming from their house. I was worried, because it sounded like a big fight. But after about 20 minutes, everything went quiet. The next morning, I found Mike taking out the trash. So, man, how did it go last night? He looked at me with a different expression, lighter, more relaxed. Frank, we talked all night. I got to know my wife for real for the first time in 5 years of marriage. And how was it? Hard, very hard. She told me every detail of the accident, every episode of blackmail from her brother, every time she had to lie to me to hide what was happening. And you? I cried, man. I cried a lot. Out of anger at Jake, out of pity for Jessica, out of anger at myself for not realizing she was suffering so much. And now we're going to rebuild our marriage from scratch, based on the truth this time. Man, the feeling of relief I felt at that moment was indescribable. Seeing a couple I respected manage to get through a crisis like that, it's priceless. And Jake? Jake. Mike smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. Jake is going to have a very unpleasant surprise this afternoon. What do you mean? I'm going to file a police report against him for extortion, and Jessica is going to get a restraining order. He's not going to get near my family again. Wow, Mike, are you sure? Absolutely, Frank, that guy, almost destroyed my marriage. He made my wife live in hell for over 10 years. He drained our money, our peace, our happiness. Now it's time for him to pay. I was impressed by his determination, and even more impressed when, in the late afternoon, I saw Jessica leaving the house with a completely different posture. She had her head held high, shoulders back, the look of someone who was finally free of a huge burden. She saw me and came over to my house. "Frank, I don't have words to thank you." "Hey, Jessica, I just helped you do what you already had the courage to do." "No, you didn't. If you hadn't shown me I was being manipulated, I would have continued to be Jake's hostage for the rest of my life." "And how are things with Mike?" "Different, very different. For the first time since we met, we're being completely honest with each other." "And Sophie?" "She noticed something changed, that her mum is happier. When she gets older, we're going to tell her the truth too. No secrets, no lies." "And Jake?" "We filed a police report today. He tried to call several times, but we didn't answer. Now it's a police matter." That night, while having dinner with Julie, I told her how the situation had been resolved. "You did a really beautiful thing, Frank. You helped a family find their way back to each other." "I did what any decent person would do, Jules." "No, my love. Most people would have pretended they didn't see anything so they wouldn't get into trouble. You chose to get involved, to take risks, to help someone. But if you think the story ends here with a happy ending and everything resolved, you're very wrong. Because on Thursday of that same week, Jake did something no one expected. Something that put the whole family in real physical danger. And this time, it was no longer psychological blackmail. It was a real physical threat. Thursday, 2:30 p.m. I was doing a ride in the Soho area when my phone rang. It was Jessica. And from her voice, I knew immediately that something was very wrong. "Frank, I need your help. It's urgent." "What happened?" "Jake. He broke into my house." My blood ran cold. "Broke in? How?" "He had a spare key that I didn't even remember existed. He got here around 2 o'clock when I was alone with Sophie. He's completely out of it, saying he's going to get revenge on me and Mike for going to the police." "Where is he now?" "He left, but he said he's coming back." "Frank, I'm scared, very scared." "Jessica, grab Sophie and get out of the house now. Go somewhere public, a mall, I don't know." "I can't. He took my wallet, my car keys. He said if I left the house or called the police, he'd do something."
Terrible. And Mike? He's at work. He won't be back. I tried to call him, but his phone's out and I cancelled and drove like crazy to my condo. On the way, I called Rick, the investigator. "Rick, remember that story I told you? The situation has escalated. The guy is physically threatening." "Damn. Did you guys file a police report?" "They did, but the guy hasn't been arrested yet, and now he's lost it. He broke into there."
"Okay, send me the address. I'm on my way too. And call the cops, man." The victim said he threatened to do something worse if she called the police. "Frank, in case of a direct threat, you have to call the police. The guy has already crossed the line." I got to the condo and parked in front of Jessica's house. I rang the doorbell and she opened the door quickly. She was waiting for me at the window. "Thank God you came," she said, clearly in a panic. I went inside and saw Sophie playing in the
Living room, oblivious to what was happening. Jessica pulled me into the kitchen. "Tell me everything that..." "He got here around 2 o'clock, using the key he had saved since he helped me move in. He came in screaming, saying I had destroyed his life, that because of me he was going to be arrested. I tried to calm him down. I said we could talk, but he was completely out of it, Frank. Smelling of alcohol, red-eyed, talking non-stop." "What exactly did he say?" "That
If he was going to get screwed over for the blackmail, he'd at least make sure I got screwed over too. He said he was going to tell everyone in the condo about the accident. He was going to spread the word that I'm a murderer. That's not a crime, Jessica. He can say whatever he wants. It's not just that, Frank." She lowered her voice and looked toward the living room where Sophie was. "He said he knows where my daughter's school is. He said he knows her schedule, the route she takes every day." Now things had gotten serious. A threat against a child is another level entirely. "Jessica, we have to call the police now." He said if I called the police, he'd make Sophie disappear. He said he has contacts that he can get her out of the country before the police find her. That's a bluff, Jessica. What if it's not? "Frank, I can't risk my daughter's life." It was at that moment that we heard a car pulling up in front of the house. We looked out the window, and it was Jake's black Civic. "Shit," I muttered. He got out of the car, stumbling. He was clearly intoxicated. He was carrying a whiskey bottle in one hand and what looked like a machete in the other. "Jessica, grab Sophie and go to the back bedroom. Lock the door and don't come out. What about you?" "I'll try to talk to him." "Frank, no, he's armed." "Jessica, go now." She picked up her daughter and ran to the room. I stayed in the living room, trying to decide what the best strategy was. I quickly called Rick. "Man, he's back. He's armed and drunk." "I'm on my way. And I already called the cops. Just hold on for 5 more minutes." Jake started banging on the door with force. "Jessica, open this damn door." I opened it before he made more of a scene and attracted the attention of other neighbors. "Hey, Jake, take it easy." He looked at me with surprise, clearly not expecting to find me there. "What the hell are you doing here?" "I came to visit Jessica. What's going on?" "That bitch sister of mine reported me to the police. Me, who's always taken care of her, always protected her." "Protected her how? By blackmailing her?" "Blackmailing!" he yelled, raising the machete. "I saved her life. If it weren't for me, she would have been arrested for homicide." "Jake, lower that weapon. Let's talk like civilized people." "Civilized? Civilized?" He let out a hysterical laugh. "There's nothing civilized about this story, my friend. Do you know what she did? Do you really know?" He pushed the door open, and I had to back away. "Jake, we can solve this without violence." "Oh, you can? Then solve it. Solve the fact that my sister destroyed my life. Solve the fact that now I'm going to be arrested for extortion." "Man, you got yourself into this situation. No one told you to blackmail your own sister." "I didn't blackmail anyone," he screamed, pointing the machete at me. "I charged a fee for my services, for keeping my mouth shut." "And what were those services? You want to know? Do you?"
"Really want to know?" He threw himself onto the sofa, still holding the weapon, and took a swig straight from the bottle. "I helped that bitch hide Melissa's body." My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "Melissa didn't die in the accident, you idiot. She died afterward, when we got to the hospital. And you know why? Because Jessica didn't want to call an ambulance right away." "What kind of story is this?" "When they crashed the car, both of them were injured, but alive. Melissa was
"Bleeding a lot, begging for help. And you know what Jessica did?" I was so afraid of the answer that I almost couldn't ask. "What?" She panicked. She said if she called an ambulance, the police would find out they were drunk, driving without a license. She spent half an hour trying to decide what to do, while Melissa bled in the back seat. Man, I felt like I had been punched in the gut. If this was true, it changed everything. "And you were there?" "Of course I was. Who do you think went to get her in the middle of the night?" She called me, desperate, asking for help. When I got there, Melissa was almost unconscious. "And you took her to the hospital?" "We did, but it was too late. If Jessica had called for help right away, Melissa would be alive today." Jake took another swig and continued. "And you know what happened after that? Melissa's parents wanted to investigate why it took so long for their daughter to get to the hospital. Jessica was desperate, begging me not to tell her that he cheats."
"Truth. She said she'd give me anything if I lied at the police station." "And you lied?" "I lied. I said I found them right after the accident, that we rushed straight to the hospital. I saved my sister's ass from a felony homicide charge." Guys, if this version was true, Jake really had a charge. It wasn't baseless blackmail. He had helped cover up negligence that resulted in death. And that's why you charge her money. That's why I used to charge his tense, because now it's all over for. It was at that moment that I heard sirens approach. The police were arriving. Jake heard them too and panicked. "Shit, you called the police." "It wasn't me, man, but look, just give up. Don't make the situation worse." Worse. He got up, stumbling, pointing the machete at me. "My situation can't get any worse. I'm going to be arrested for extortion while my sister stays free after killing her best friend." "Jake, lower that weapon. The police are already here." "Jessica!" he yelled toward the bedroom. "Jessica, get out here!" The back door opened slowly and she appeared without Sophie. "Jake, for God's sake, stop this!" "Stop this? Stop this!" He laughed hysterically. "Now you want me to stop? After reporting me to the police?" "I had no choice. You were threatening me. I was protecting you like I always have." The sirens were getting closer and closer. 3 police cars stopped in front of the house. "Jake," Jessica said, in the calmest voice she could muster.
Just give up. We can solve this in court. Solve it? Jessica, you owe me over $100,000 in money I've taken from you over the years. You think I can pay that back? We'll figure something out. There's no figure out, he screamed. My life is over because of you. The police started banging on the door. Police, open the door! Jake, completely panicked. He ran toward Jessica with the machete in his hand, but I managed to intercept him. We rolled on the floor, fighting for the weapon. Let go of it, I yelled. The front door burst open and 4 police officers entered with their guns drawn. Drop your weapons! Get on the ground! Now! I let go of Jake and threw myself on the floor on my stomach. He stood there for a few seconds, still holding the machete, looking at the officers. Drop the weapon, kid! That's when he did the dumbest thing possible. He ran toward the police with the machete raised. A shot rang out. Jake fell to the ground, hit in the leg. The machete flew away. Call an ambulance! One of the officers yelled. Jessica started crying desperately. Oh my God, what happened? The police immobilized Jake, who was groaning in pain on the floor. I got up slowly, still in shock. Who are you, sir? One of the officers asked me. Frank Jones, their neighbor. I was trying to help. And you, ma'am? Jessica Miller. He was my brother, she replied, looking at Jake on the ground. The ambulance arrived quickly. The paramedics stabilized Jake and took him to the hospital. The police stayed to take our statement. Ma'am, we need you to come with us to the precinct to formalize the report, the detective who arrived afterwards said. Can I call my husband? Yes, you can. Mike arrived half an hour later, frantic. When he found out what had happened, he was in shock. Jessica, thank God you're okay. Mike, there's something I need to tell you about the accident. Later, babe. Later. Now let's deal with this situation. At the police station, the whole story came out. Jessica told them about the blackmail. I showed them the recording from Sunday. But we also had to deal with the new version of events that Jake had revealed. The detective, Sergeant Martinez, was very direct. Ms. Miller, your brother claims you were slow to help the accident victim in 2013. Is that true? Jessica looked at Mike, then at me, and finally answered, It's true. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I was afraid of being arrested. And did Mr. Miller help you lie to the investigators back then? He did. Mike took her hand. Detective, this was over 10 years ago. She was a minor. She was in shock. Mr. Miller, I understand the situation. But if there is evidence of hit and run, the case can be reopened. But detective, I interjected, that doesn't justify 10 years of blackmail. Jake exploited her trauma to take money from the family. I agree completely. The extortion is a serious crime, but the issue of the accident needs to be investigated as well. We left the police station around midnight. Mike, Jessica, and I stood talking in the parking lot. Jessica, is what your brother said true? About you being slow to help Melissa? She started to cry. It's true, Mike. I completely panicked. Melissa was bleeding a lot, groaning in pain, and I was paralyzed. I couldn't think straight. For how long? About 20 minutes, maybe half an hour. I know it was a long time. I know she might be alive if I had acted faster. Mike hugged her. Jessica, you were 16 years old. You were drunk, in shock, in the middle of the night. Anyone could have reacted that way. But a person died because of my cowardice. A person died because of an accident. The rest is a consequence of the trauma. Guys, seeing that family deal with so many secrets being revealed all at once, it was heartbreaking. And now, Jessica asked, will they investigate me for what happened?
In 2013? I don't know, replied. But one thing I do know, this time we'll face everything together. No secrets, no lie. And Jake will be held accountable for his crime. And if he wants to expose what happened in 2013, let him. We're not going to live in fear. It was one of the most intense conversations I've ever witnessed in my life. A couple deciding to face the truth, no matter how painful. But you know how it is. When you think you've seen
everything in a story, there's always one more twist. And the twist that happened the following week, man, that changed everything we thought we knew about Jake, about the accident, and about the real reason behind all this blackmail. Because sometimes, guys, the person who seems to be the villain in the story is actually a victim of something much bigger. A week after the events at Jessica's house, I was doing my normal route when I got an unexpected call. It was from Detective Martinez, the officer in charge of the case. "Frank, can you come to the precinct? There have been some developments in the case that you need to know about." "What kind of developments?" "It's better if you come in person, and if possible, bring Mike and Jessica too." Man, my stomach churned right away. What new information could have come up? I called Mike and explained the situation. We met at the precinct an hour later. Jessica was visibly nervous. Since the episode with her brother, she had been at her wit's end. Detective Martinez received us in a private room with a serious expression. "Folks, Jake asked to talk to me yesterday. He said he wanted to tell the whole truth about what happened in 2013. "What truth?" Mike asked. "A very different truth from the one he told last Thursday." The detective opened a folder with documents and began to read. According to his statement from yesterday, the story about the delay in getting help is a lie. Melissa actually died in the accident, on the spot. There was no hit and run. Jessica's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "Jake admitted he invented that version to increase the weight of the blackmail on you. He said the more guilty you felt, the easier it was to manipulate you." Mike slammed his fist on the table. "That son of a bitch. He tortured my wife with lies." "Calm down, Mr. Miller. There's more." Detective Martinez turned the page of the statement. Jake also revealed why he started blackmailing his sister, and it wasn't out of
family solidarity always. Then why was it? Because he owed a lot of money to some serious loan sharks, a lot of money. The story that was revealed was even more sordid than we had imagined. Jake had gotten involved with illegal gambling in DC, starting when he was a teenager. When Jessica moved to New York and married Mike, he saw an opportunity to solve his financial problem. He invented this whole story of having incriminating proof to justify the demand.
money. In reality, he never had any proof of anything because there was nothing to prove. "And why did he decide to tell the truth now?" Jessica asked. "Because of what happened on Thursday. He realized he had completely lost control of the situation. And most importantly, because the loan sharks found out where he was and came after him. Detective Martinez showed us photos of injuries on Jake's body. He was beaten up in jail. They weren't ordinary inmates. They were people sent by his..."
So my brother-in-law isn't just an extortionist, he's also a loan shark debtor. Exactly. And his debt today is around $300,000 a shock. 300,000 with interest and adjustments. And the worst part, since he used the Miller family name to get some loans, the loan sharks might come after you guys too. Now the situation had become really dangerous. It was no longer a matter of family.
Blackmail, it was a matter of physical safety. "Detective, what do we do?" Mike asked. Jake offered to cooperate with the justice system. He wants to expose the loan shark ring in exchange for protection. But that means you might be called to testify, you might be threatened. And if we don't cooperate, then you're on your own with the loan sharks. And from my experience, these people don't mess around. We left the police station with our heads spinning. In 1 week, that family's life had been completely turned upside down. Mike decided they would temporarily move to his parents' house in a suburb of New Jersey, at least until the situation was resolved. "Frank, man, I don't know how to thank you for everything," he said as they loaded their bags into the car. "Mike, you would have done the same for me." "I would have, but it's a good thing you got involved in this story. Otherwise, we would have never discovered the truth. The truth is freeing, right? Even when it hurts." Jessica came up to me with tears in her eyes. "Frank, I spent 10 years of my life feeling guilty for something that didn't even happen. 10 years thinking I was a murderer. Jessica, the important thing is that now you know you're not, that you never were. How do you think I'll be able to get over this? How will I be able to forgive my brother? One day at a time, and with psychological help. You went through a very big trauma, not just the accident, but years of psychological manipulation." Mike put his arm around his wife. "We'll get through this together, babe. I promise you." Little Sophie, who didn't understand anything that was happening, came running to hug her dad's legs. "Daddy, why are we going to Grandpa and Grandma's house?" "Because we're going to have a little vacation there, Princess." They left on a Wednesday morning. I stood there in front of the condo, watching their car disappear around the corner, thinking about how a routine ride had completely changed old Tsitsi, family's life. 2 weeks later, Detective Martinez called me with an update. "Frank, the loan shark case was resolved. We arrested the ringleader and 8 other people. Jake, really cooperated a lot. And him? He'll be held accountable for the extortion, but he'll probably get a plea deal. He'll do community service, psychological treatment, things like that. And the investigation into the 2013 accident? Dismissed. There's no evidence of a crime. It was an accident, just like the original case file said. The following weekend, Mike called me from New Jersey. Frank, we're coming back to New York next week. How are things over there? Better. Much better. Jessica started therapy. She's dealing with everything better, and we're closer than ever. And Sophie? She's loving her grandparents. She doesn't even want to come back. He laughed. And you guys, do you want to come back? We do. New York is our home, and we're not going to run away from problems anymore. When they came back, it was as if they were different people. Jessica had a glow in her eyes that I had never seen before. Mike was more affectionate and attentive to her. Sophie was happy as always, but now with parents who really talk to each other. On a Thursday night, they invited me for dinner. It was one of the most enjoyable meals of my life. Not because of the food, but because of the atmosphere. It was a real family, with no secrets, no lies, no fear. Frank, Jessica said during dessert, I'll never forget what you did for me. Jessica, No, let me talk. You saved me. Literally. I was at rock bottom, being manipulated, thinking I deserved to suffer for the rest of my life. You showed me I was a victim, not a culprit. Mike added, and you saved our marriage too. If the blackmail had continued, we would have ended up getting divorced. I would have found out everything in a much worse way. You guys saved yourselves, I replied. I just gave you a little push. A little push that changed our lives. That night, on my way home, I thought about everything that had happened in the last 2 months. How a simple rideshare trip had placed me in the middle of a complex family drama, full of secrets, traumas, and manipulation. I thought about how many families must live in similar situations, people being blackmailed, manipulated, controlled by close relatives. How many Jessicas are out there carrying guilt they shouldn't be carrying? And I thought about the importance of not turning away when we see someone in trouble. It's easy to pretend it's not our problem, that we shouldn't get involved, but sometimes an outsider with an objective perspective can make all the difference. 3 months later, I ran into Jake on the street by chance. He was thin, looking down, but sober. He greeted me a little awkwardly. Frank, how's it going? It's going well, Jake. And you? Ah, man, one day at a time, you know? I started treatment for gambling.
Addiction, I'm doing community service, trying to rebuild my life. And your family? Jessica doesn't talk to me anymore. Neither does Mike. I don't blame them in time. No, man. What I did is unforgivable. I psychologically tortured my own sister for years. For money, for silent minutes. Frank, can I ask you something? Sure. Take care of her. Jessica has always been fragile. She's always needed protection. I was the one who should have protected, but I did the opposite. She doesn't need protection. She's strong now. Then make sure she stays. He went on his way, and I stood there thinking how some people can get so lost in life that they end up destroying the people they love. Today, almost a year later, whenever I pass by Mike and Jessica's house, I see a happy family. Sophie playing in the yard, washing the car, Jessica watering the plants. Normal scenes of a normal family. And I know that in
some way I helped build that normality. I helped a family find their way back to each other, to get rid of the ghosts of the past, to live without fear. Sometimes, guys, we don't choose the situations that appear in our lives, but we can always choose how to react to them. And I chose not to turn my back on a family in trouble. It was the best choice I could have made. A year has passed since that ride that changed everything. Today is a Thursday in October, exactly like it was on that day when I picked up Jessica and Jake from the Serene Stay Motel. I was doing my normal rides when I got a message from Jessica. Frank, do you have time for coffee this afternoon? I have some news to tell you. Of course I was curious. We met at a coffee shop in the West Village, near where it all began. Hi Frank, how are you? Man, the difference in Jessica was impressive. She was radiant, with a genuine smile, wearing colourful clothes. Nothing like the haunted woman I met last year. I'm great.
Frank, better than I've been in my whole life. And what's the news? She placed her hand on a slightly did belly. I'm pregnant, 3 months. Wow, it's truly. Jessica, what wonderful news. Congratulations. Thank you. And you know what? For the first time in my life, I'm living a pregnancy without secrets. It's an incredible feeling. He's over the moon. Sophie is already all excited to be a big sister. We talked for over an...
She told me about therapy, which was helping a lot to process all the trauma. She told me about her relationship with Mike, which was more solid than ever. Frank, we talk about everything now. Literally everything. There are no more forbidden topics between us. And how are you dealing with the Jake situation? Her expression became more serious. It's hard, very hard. But in therapy, I learned that I can have compassion for him without accepting what he did. Do you keep in touch? No. Maybe in the future, when I'm more psychologically prepared, but I can't right now. That's understandable. You know what else helped me in therapy? Understanding that I was a victim of psychological abuse for years. This wasn't my fault. It never was, Jessica. I know that now, but it took me a long time to accept it. When I was leaving the coffee shop, she gave me a big hug. Frank, I can't thank you enough. You literally saved my life, my marriage, my family. Jessica, come on. You'd steer. Guys did all the hard work, but you were the one who gave us the courage to start. I went home that day with a warm heart. Seeing someone you've helped prosper, be happy, live without fear, it's priceless. A few weeks later, I was driving by the condo when I saw some strange activity at the house that used to be Jake's. There were people loading furniture. I asked Mr. Anderson, the doorman, Mr. Anderson, did someone move into Jake's house? No, honey. Someone moved out of Jake's house. He sold it to the family. What do you mean? The young man came here last week with all the paperwork. He said he was moving to DC for good, that he was going to start his life over there. And did he leave any message? He left a letter for his sister, but she didn't want to receive it. I thought about that. Maybe Jake really was trying to rebuild his life. I hope he can. Everyone deserves a second chance. In late November, Mike invited me to be the baby's godfather. Frank, Jessica and I talked, and we want you to be our son's godfather. Mike, man, I'm honored, but are you sure? Absolutely, you're family to us. And if it's a girl, then you'll be our daughter's godfather. He laughed. In March of the following year, Michael was born. A beautiful, healthy baby boy who came into the world in a family full of love and no secrets. At the hospital, holding my godson for the first time, I thought about how crazy life is. 2 years ago, I was just a rideshare driver doing routine rides. Today, I'm the godfather of the son of people I consider family. Frank, Jessica said from the hospital bed, look at what was born from our story. What do you mean? Michael wouldn't exist if we hadn't resolved our problems, if Mike and I hadn't truly reconnected. Yeah, I guess. So he's the fruit of everything we went through, the tears, the fears, but also the courage to face the truth. Mike added, he's our truth baby. Man, I cried right there in the hospital. I'm not ashamed to admit it. Today, almost 3 years after that fateful ride, whenever I tell this story to my passengers, and believe me, there's always someone who wants to hear it, I end with the same reflection. Life is full of secrets that hold us captive. Past traumas, fears of the future, shames we carry. But the truth, no matter how painful it is, always sets us free. Jessica lived for 10 years as a prisoner of guilt that she shouldn't have even carried. Mike lived for 5 years married to
a woman he didn't truly know. Jake got lost in his own. But when the truth finally came out, even though it was painful, even though it caused an initial storm, it made room for rebuilding, for healing, truer love. And you know what my lesson in this whole story was? That sometimes we need to be brave enough to get involved in other people's, of course, with responsibility, with care, with the intention to help. But if I had pretended I didn't see anything, that
day, if I had followed the rule of I don't get involved in anyone's business, an entire family would be destroyed today. Sometimes, guys, we're put in the path of certain people, not by chance. It's to make a difference. It's to be an instrument of change. Today, Michael is 2 years old. Sophie is 7 and is the most protective big sister in the world. Mike is still working at the dealership, but now with much more peace of mind. Jessica went back to school. She's studying psychology. She wants to help other people who have gone through trauma. And me? I'm still a rideshare driver, driving the streets of New York, listening to stories, meeting people, but now with a certainty. If I see someone who needs help, I won't turn my back, because life is made of human connection. And sometimes a single person willing to listen, to care, to act, can change everything. Jessica and Mike's story could have ended in several ways. It could have ended in divorce, in tragedy, in destroyed lives. But it ended with a family that's stronger, more united and happier than ever. It ended with the victory of truth over lies. It ended with love. And for me, that's what matters. This was the most impactful story I've ever lived as a rideshare driver. A simple ride that turned into a life lesson about courage, truth, and the importance of not turning our backs when we see someone in trouble. If you like this story, leave a like and share it with someone you think needs to hear it. Because sometimes someone else's story can be exactly what someone needs to find the courage to face their own demons. And remember, the truth always sets you free, even when it hurts. Until next time, folks, and thanks for joining me on this emotional journey.